Beyond Reason Radio.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Here's a headline from CNN Money. Mexico hits U.S. exports with $3 billion in levies. So it turns out the U.S. trade dispute with Mexico is heating up. I believe Mexico is going to start tariffing in terms of exporting to us pork. So when we export pork to them, that will not be good. I don't know. Hopefully pork prices will not go up here because I love my bacon. I'm just saying. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason, the voice of truth in a world that is beyond reason. We're on until 9 p.m. tonight, right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. Of course, after the show, you can catch the podcast of it anywhere that podcasts are available. I'm going to talk a lot of different things going on today, including Trump's trade war, which I have some concerns about, which I've talked about on the show before, but I want to get into a little more details of some of my concerns. And also, of course, we have Mr. Tom Benson producing as well. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing fine. How do? Speaking of food, did you hear what KFC is up to?
No.
They're trying to develop a meatless chicken. So it'd be acceptable to vegans who don't eat meat.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how they could do it. It seems to me it would taste like tofu or something, with kind of a rubbery, no flavor, no taste to it.
Most of that meatless meat, I don't know. Is that what you call it? I don't know what that means, if that's an actual sentence, but most of it doesn't taste very good. Most of it's pretty nasty.
Yeah.
So I want to get into this talk because there's been a lot of talk because President Trump is going to the G7 summit very soon, and they're going to talk trade because he has implemented tariffs against Mexico, against the EU, and against China. And one thing that's really interesting about this is you have his economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, who is supporting him on this, which is really kind of baffling because in the past he has not supported Trump on these things. So all of a sudden it's changed. And my biggest problem with this, well, I want to get to that in a second. And by the way, we'll take your calls as well. 407-916-5400. You can text to 23680 where standard message and data rates apply. By the way, you have some in the Senate, including Senator Bob Corker, who unveiled a bill to check Trump's ability to impose tariffs. So he wouldn't be able to just do it unilaterally. He would have to have approval by the Senate, basically, which isn't that kind of the way it's supposed to be to begin with? I mean, we've given a lot of power, and this isn't just Trump. Every president has had this power. Isn't that giving him a lot of power, the president, to impose tariffs just when he wants to? I mean, he's doing it. Trump says he is doing this for national security reasons. I don't buy that argument. I think he's doing it for economic reasons. He's believed in tariffs. He's believed in protectionism for decades. And some of his economic advisors have believed in it for decades, and they believed in it because of economic reasons. To say all of a sudden it's a national security threat, I just don't buy it. I think that's an excuse because they can use that so the president has that power. But someone else brought this point. I've heard others bring up this point as well, and I think it's a good point. Basically, when you have Trump and you give the president the ability to impose tariffs without the approval of Congress, you're giving the president the ability to impose a tax without the approval of Congress. Think of it that way. Because a tariff on goods, when you're importing goods and you put a tariff on it, you're putting a tax on it. That's what a tariff is. A tariff is a tax. So that's a lot of power we give to the president to impose taxes on us. I'm not sure I would want any president to have that power, Trump, Obama, anyone. But Trump is using that power right now, and they're using the national security argument. Like I said before, I just don't buy it. I don't think it's a national security threat. Canada, Britain, the EU, they are more than happy to give us steel to build up our military. They are more than happy to have us use all that to build up our military, and there's no sign that that's going to change anytime soon. So this is about protecting certain industries for politics. That's what it is. He made promises to specific American industries. The steel industry is one of them. He made promises to them for political reasons. And that's why he's doing this. And I don't like that because that's, once again, that's a government. You're giving the government a lot of power to pick winners and losers in the global marketplace. Now, Larry Kudlow did a press conference yesterday because he's talking about the upcoming G7 summit. A lot of talk about that because he's going to meet with the EU nations and all that, and they're not happy with him right now. And they're imposing tariffs on us, and we're kind of starting a trade war. How much it's going to escalate, I don't know. But I want to go into one of the problems I have with Trump's thinking on trade. Well, let's just play Kudlow first. This was Kudlow yesterday. Go ahead and play cut one for me, Tom Benson.
And I also think his role as a probably the strongest trade reformer of the past 20 years, not only protect American interests, but to open up avenues of growth for our business and our workers, and frankly, to help open up world growth. The world trading system is a mess. It is broken down. And insofar as fairness and reciprocity and ultimately free trade, I think this is contributing to our economic growth and our confidence. So I think the policies are working, and my great hope is that our friends at the G7 will take notice of these policies and work with us to extend and expand them so we can have a prosperous U.S. and world economy.
So Larry Kudlow comes in there, and first he talks about how great the American economy is doing. And he talks about the tax cuts and the deregulation, which both are helping the economy grow. There's no doubt about that. But then he talks about how, well, he thinks Trump's trade reform practices are helping the economy. I don't really see a lot of evidence of that. In fact, it might hurt the economy in the long run because a lot of these tariffs haven't really been implemented yet. So it's hard to see how exactly they're going to affect the economy. So to say that they're helping the economy right now is really interesting. But my problem with all of this is I'm kind of confused on what the goal is here with the Trump administration and trade, because I'm getting competing messages. It seems like what Larry Kudlow is talking about there is this is just a negotiation tactic to get all these other countries to lower their trade barriers so we can export more products into their countries. And that I kind of understand. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I kind of understand what they're doing then. He talks about reciprocity. If that's the goal, that's not necessarily a bad goal. I want more markets for American companies to be able to compete in. I think that would be a good thing. Now, will that automatically lower the trade deficit? It's hard to tell because a lot of that depends on their economy. Trade deficits are not a zero-sum thing. One reason we have trade deficits with other countries is because we have more money to spend, so we have more people that buy more products than they have in their countries. That might not change with tariffs or whatever. So it's not automatically assumed that them lowering their tariffs is going to lower trade deficits. Lowering the trade deficit shouldn't be the only goal here. But if this is a negotiation tactic, maybe it's a good thing. We still haven't come up with a deal. Trump is apparently the big deal maker, but there haven't been any deals. So I want to see the deals before we start giving Trump all this praise. But then Larry Kudlow says something else here when he's asked another question about it. And this is what I mean by the competing narratives on this issue. Here's what he said.
With respect to his trade reform efforts, that we will do what is necessary to protect the United States, its businesses, and its workforce, so that we may have disagreements, we may have tactical disagreements, but he has always said, and I agree, tariffs are a tool in that effort, and people should recognize how serious he is in that respect.
So he says there that what Trump wants to do is protect certain American industries, and that tariffs are a tool to do that. So this is what I'm confused about. Is Trump pushing protectionism for the sake of protectionism, believing that tariffs are a good thing because they protect certain American industries? Or is this a negotiation tactic to eventually open up free trade? I don't know. I don't really know what the goal of the Trump administration is because I'm constantly getting competing narratives on this. If the goal is to open up free trade, that's not the worst thing in the world. We'll have to see if it works. But if the goal is just blanket protectionism, then why don't we just keep the tariffs permanent? Why don't we just have the tariffs be permanent? Or is that the goal, to have the tariffs permanent? Because that would be what protectionism is. So I don't know. I'm getting these competing narratives out of the Trump administration. And that's partly because Trump has been conflicted on this issue, and people in his administration have been conflicted on this issue as well. And I'll get to that in a sec. Now, a couple of days ago on Jake Tapper's show, The Lead, he had Mick Mulvaney on, who is Trump's budget director, and he was asked about what's going on with trade and the trade war. And this is what he said about it.
But the bottom line is this. The president has said a couple of things. He said he's going to protect American industry. He's going to protect American families. And that's part and parcel of this. So I don't think anybody should be surprised at this. I saw the president speak last week in Nashville, Tennessee, and the banner behind him said, "Promises made, promises kept." This is what he said he was going to do. So we give him credit for that. He's actually keeping to his promises. Everything that we've done since we've been here has been good for the American families and American businesses. And at the end of the day, the trade policies will be as well.
All right, so there we go again. You have Mick Mulvaney. Now, he's right about one thing. This is what Trump promised to do. He's been promising to do this for decades. He has wanted to have some sort of protectionism because he believes that trade is unfair around the world. So when he comes in and imposes tariffs, nobody really should be too surprised by it because he's right. Trump has promised to do that. But once again, I hear those words by Mick Mulvaney. Protectionism. He wants to protect certain industries. And then later, Mick Mulvaney will say, well, he wants to open up more free trade. Well, which is it? Is it to protect certain industries from competition? Or is it a negotiation tactic to open up free trade? I don't think anyone really has the answer to that because I don't think anyone's really sure. I've heard competing narratives. Another example of that would be what's coming out from one of his economic advisors on this issue is Peter Navarro. Peter Navarro has been big on protectionism for a long time. Well, Peter Navarro had an opinion piece in USA Today, and this is what the headline says. It says, Donald Trump's steel aluminum tariffs bring back manufacturing jobs. It says, striking a blow on behalf of working men and women, Donald Trump's policies are bringing jobs to destitute towns like Ashland, Kentucky, while revitalizing American manufacturing. And he has a whole piece here on how these tariffs are good because these companies will no longer have to compete with the overseas and believe unfair trade practices, and that the tariffs help protectionism, these certain manufacturing companies. Well, if that's the case, then keep the tariffs permanent. Then that means that tariffs are a good thing. It protects those industries. Having the tariffs, which is what Peter Navarro was saying, then that means that the tariffs are permanent. And then that permanent tariffs would be good for the economy. So which is it? Is it what Peter Navarro wants, which is protectionism, permanent protectionism to protect certain industries? Or is it some grand type of deal-making negotiation strategy to get other countries to lower their trade barriers? And once they do, then we'll lower ours. I don't know what the answer is, and frankly, I'm not sure Trump knows what the answer is because he has competing narratives coming out of his own mouth and also coming out of the administration. That's what bothers me most about this because I get a lot of criticism when I talk about Trump's trade practices and how I don't like it. But this is why. And I hear people say, like Peter Navarro, that, well, what tariffs do is it forces us to buy more American steel. And if we buy more American steel, it will create more American manufacturing jobs. Those American companies will get more profits, and then they'll use those profits to reinvest, and it'll help the American economy. That's not necessarily the case, because what happens is those American companies raise their prices. And when they raise their prices, it could just mean less growth completely. It could just mean people will stop buying as much steel as they were buying before. Economics doesn't work as, oh, well, we're not going to buy it there, so we have to buy it here. They might just not buy it at all. So it's too simplistic of a view when you talk about protectionism. But there's also some negative facts about the tariffs that don't get a lot of attention. Believe it or not, tariffs on aluminum and steel could actually hurt American manufacturing. What am I talking about? Well, the Washington Post had an interesting piece out of Cleveland. There's an Ohio factory that was trying to compete with a Chinese company. And basically, they have a bid to make a contract to make commercial sausage stuffers for a company that wants to replace its Chinese supplier.
No wonder that would catch your attention.
Yeah, I know, because it's food. Yes, I know. Yeah, that's true. Don't mess with my food. This is what I'm saying. So there's a guy who owns this company. His name is Bill Adler. He basically uses steel that he imports to make these manufacturing equipment, among other things, to make sausage stuffers. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people get that from China, but he was trying to outbid them and have them get here. So that's bringing American manufacturing jobs back to America, right? Well, the problem is these tariffs are now hurting this guy's company, and he might not win that contract now. He might not be able to compete with China because of the tariffs. But I thought the tariffs were supposed to help manufacturing. In fact, I have some audio from Bill Adler talking about this. It's the steel cut, Tom Benson. Go ahead and play that. He talks about how these tariffs, he actually talks about how he likes the tax cuts. He likes Trump's deregulation policies, but then this trade stuff is actually hurting his business. Here it is.
My wife and I bought Stripmatic in 1992. We found a small company with a niche process that made stamped tubular shaped parts. Just the threat of the import tariffs impacted us at the very beginning of this year as steel prices started to escalate. Our prices now are 25 to 50% higher than what they were 6 months ago. Long term, this is going to make a significant impact on our profitability, whether I'm going to be able to retain some of my business. So I'm in a very tough spot if we don't get these resolved very soon. Out of the gate for the Trump administration, the administration made some great moves, reducing a lot of the regulations that had manufacturing handcuffed. The results of the tax cut all really invigorated the economy, and it showed in our customers and our orders. The import tariff, it's like we've already been through the 2002 Bush import tariffs, and we've already seen that this ends up really poorly for manufacturing. We lost probably 20% of U.S. metal stampers.
So there you go. It's a little bit of what he was saying there. And he talks about how this is a small business, small manufacturing business. It's in Ohio. The economy was improving. His business was improving because of Trump's policies, deregulation and tax cuts. And then he poses these tariffs, and he's already seeing the negative effects of it. So this idea that protectionism is automatically going to help manufacturing, it's not. That's not true. You're going to see negative effects as well. It might help certain industries. That's what protectionism does, place favorites for certain industries like the steel industry, but it could hurt other manufacturing as well. So we'll see what happens, but I'm just tired of the competing narratives coming out. Does he support protectionism, or is he just for negotiation? 407-916-5400, text to 23680. So Samantha Bee is apologizing. Sort of. We'll play that next, and we'll be right back. This is Beyond Reason Radio.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
All right, welcome back to the show. We were talking about Trump's trade war in the last segment. I asked for some calls, and we have a call right now. So let's take it. Let's go to Scott in Altamont. Scott, what's your take on this?
I think he has said over and over again that he will use this as a negotiating tactic, tying China with North Korea and even that ZTE deal. He's famous for this. I say this as a fan. He is someone who will take something away from someone and then negotiate to let them get it back.
Okay, so you think it's a negotiating tactic. All right. I hope you're right, Scott. I do. I hope you're right. I hope that's all this is, and I hope it works. You know, people say Trump is famous for this. Sometimes I wonder about that. I wonder if he's really famous for this or he's famous at marketing himself as the deal maker. He had that book, Art of the Deal, but I haven't seen too many actual deals. I've heard a lot of talk that he is the deal maker, but so far there haven't been any great deals. He's gotten out of a lot of deals, which is fine. I was okay with a lot of that, but that's very interesting. All right, so another thing that made a lot of news in the past couple weeks is Samantha Bee. In fact, you will remember what started this whole controversy on her show Full Frontal on TBS. She was talking about Ivanka Trump, and, well, this is what she said. Go ahead and play cut one for me, Tom Benson.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless He listens to you.
All right, so she got a lot of backlash for that, for using that word against Ivanka Trump. Obviously, it's offensive. And even the context of that was even offensive. It wasn't even just the word. But Samantha Bee, then, she was on this week, and she apologized, sort of, for the comment. Here's her apology.
Hi, I'm Samantha Bee. You know, a lot of people were offended and angry that I used an epithet to describe the president's daughter and advisor last week. It is a word I have used on the show many times, hoping to reclaim it. This time, I used it as an insult. I crossed the line, I regret it, and I do apologize for that. The problem is that many women have heard that word at the worst moments of their lives. A lot of them don't want that word reclaimed. They want it gone. And I don't blame them. I don't want to inflict more pain on them. I want this show to be challenging, and I want it to be honest, but I never intended it to hurt anyone except Ted Cruz. Many men were also offended by my use of the word. I do not care about that. I hate that this distracted from more important issues. I hate that I did something to contribute to the nightmare of 24-hour news cycles that we're all white-knuckling through. I should have known that a potty-mouthed insult would be inherently more interesting to them than juvenile immigration policy. I would do anything to help those kids. I hate that this distracted from them, so to them, I am also sorry. And look, if you are worried about the death of civility, don't sweat it. I'm a comedian. People who hone their voices in basement bars while yelling back at drunk hecklers are definitely not paragons of civility. I'm really sorry that I said that word, but you know what? Civility is just nice words. Maybe we should all worry a little bit more about the niceness of our actions. Okay, thanks for listening.
So she's sorry, but not really sorry for saying the actual word because, well, she's trying to reclaim it, whatever that means. I don't know what that means. You're trying to reclaim a bad, offensive word? Whatever. It's just stupid. I hate that whole argument. I'm trying to reclaim it.
She still has a lot of sponsors who are staying away from the show.
Of course they are.
Most of the commercial positions were promos for other TBS shows this past week.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if how soon they come back, if ever.
Yeah, I mean, then she went through this whole thing, and she's really sorry that this distracted from the important news. Whatever, you're not.
Well, I would assume the ratings for last night's show were higher than normal.
Yeah, of course they were.
But what's going to happen next week and the week after that?
Yeah, here's my biggest problem with all of this. One, she talks about, well, she basically says at the end, who cares about civility? Maybe we should care more about the actions than about civility. Well, that's what got us Donald Trump. You realize that. This is someone, and many people on the left criticize Trump for the words he says, for his action, because they think the president should be more civil. I tend to agree with that. I think the president should back off of like the Twitter rants and should be more civil. That being said, now you can't ever criticize Donald Trump for his lack of civility ever, because you've just basically said, well, who cares about civility? It's actions that matter. Well, civility is part of your actions. You know, talking in a civil manner when you're talking about policy isn't necessarily a bad thing. But this is the biggest problem I have with this. You know, the reason why it was so offensive to me is because it was all over just a disagreement on policy. Why is it that we cannot just disagree somewhat civilly? And I understand she's a comedian, whatever, but this is where our rhetoric is now. And it's both sides' fault. Trump does the same thing. But the point is, she couldn't just disagree with Trump on the immigration law, even though the law was in place before Trump was in office. The reason why they separate kids from their parents, is because law is when you detain someone, when you arrest a parent, you have to separate their kids from them.
Well, the parents go to jail and the kids can't go to jail.
Right, exactly. That's the law. It goes beyond immigration. It's happening in immigration now, but it goes way beyond immigration. If they don't want to be separated from their kids, they shouldn't illegally cross the border.
Amen.
So they're breaking the law, and they get arrested for breaking the law, and then they get separated from their kids. So instead of criticizing them, saying, don't cross the border illegally and bring your kids with you, because that's illegal and you can't do that. If you just don't do that, you will not be separated from your kids. So we don't care about the illegal action. We just care that they're being separated and that it feels bad. But the point is, if you have a disagreement with it, just have a disagreement with it. Why do you have to bring in Ivanka Trump, who had nothing to do with this policy, and then call her that name and then imply that she should look sexual for her dad and all that stuff? That's the biggest problem I have with this. Just because we believe in strong borders and strong immigration enforcement doesn't mean we're bad people. It doesn't mean we should be called offensive names like that. And just because Ivanka Trump is Trump's daughter, this is guilt by association. We don't even know what Ivanka thinks about the immigration policies, to be honest. But just because she's Trump's daughter, and just because her kids are not being separated from her, all she did was tweet out a picture of her kid on Memorial Day saying it's a beautiful day, and this is the criticism she gets. Why can't we just disagree on policy civilly? Why do we have to get down to this level with all disagreements and call each other the most offensive things? And both sides are doing it, and it really just annoys me. I can't stand it, and it's going to get even worse and worse and worse, and that's why we are so polarized in this country. Hopefully it doesn't lead to violence eventually, but when you start going down this road, that's usually what happens. We can't keep vilifying the other side as devils all the time, because this is what happens. It's just annoying. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. So the Democrat Party, they had primaries recently and all that stuff. There's a little bit of a split in what the future of the Democrat Party should be, I've noticed. And their strategy, depending on who you ask, is a little bit different. So we'll talk about that. And, well, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
So we've all heard the news about Howard Schultz, who is the former CEO of Starbucks. He was the executive chairman. He is stepping down as the chairman. And there has been a lot of discussion out there on what exactly that means. A lot of people think he wants to run for president in 2020. Now, I don't think he would have a chance. I don't really see any kind of big following for the former CEO of Starbucks. But that's very interesting. But he was on CNBC recently, and he was asked about the Democrat Party, because I guess he's a Democrat. He's from Seattle. Obviously, he's pretty big liberal, usually pretty liberal on a lot of things. A very, very big critic of President Trump, saying Trump has brought racism into the country and all that stuff. But he was asked about the Democrat Party, and he actually said something that's very interesting. And I think this is a split in the Democrat Party that a lot of people don't want to talk about. There's been a lot of talk about the split in the Republican Party, and there's definitely a split in the Republican Party. Usually it surrounds Trump. I've noticed, for instance, with the whole controversy recently where he disinvited the Eagles there was a split on that because Trump got a lot of criticism because it seemed like he made it all about the national anthem, even though the Eagles never kneeled. None of the Eagles players ever kneeled last year for the national anthem. So to say you're disinviting him for that reason seems disingenuous. But some conservatives called Trump out on that. And then other conservatives said, you're not a real conservative if you criticize Trump like that. So there was definitely a split in the Republican Party and conservatives, and a lot of it has to do with Trump. Tariffs is another example, definitely split over tariffs. But there's also a split in the Democrat Party, I think, and Howard Schultz on CNBC was asked about this, and his answer was pretty interesting. Here it is.
It concerns me that so many voices within the Democratic Party are going so far to the left, and I ask myself, how are we going to pay for all these things in terms of things like single payer or people espousing the fact that the government is going to give everyone a job? I don't think that's realistic, and I think we've got to get away from all of these falsehoods and start talking about the truth and not false promises.
Right. Question, and it really comes from Starbucks investors. I saw this on Twitter yesterday.
I think the greatest threat domestically to the country is this $21 trillion debt hanging over the cloud of America and future generations. And the fact that interest rates are going up, we're going to be paying close to over $400 billion in interest expense, which I think is the number one or number two issue in terms of federal expense to the country. The only way we're going to get out of that is we've got to grow the economy, in my view, 4% or greater, and then we have to go after entitlements.
Oh, the Democrat Party's going to throw him out. There is no way you can run for president as a Democrat and say the things he just said. But what he said was pretty reasonable when you think about it. This is kind of my voice of reason of the day, even though he's never reasonable, and I hate to say that about him. But he basically said, look, the Democrats are just making a bunch of false promises. They're talking about guaranteeing everyone a job. They're talking about single-payer health care. They're talking about basic income and all that stuff. And he's saying, where's the money going to come from for all this stuff? And it's incredibly unrealistic. And maybe the Democrats should get off of this stuff because it seems like the Democrats, mostly Bernie Sanders, they have focused on welfare. All those things we talked about, they're forms of welfare. That's what they are.
Give everybody a government job.
So you now have the Democrat Party that is focused on welfare programs. And Howard Schultz is coming in and he goes, we probably should get away from this. Because one, it's going to cost way too much money, and two, it's unrealistic. I mean, is he wrong? He's exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, but the Democrat Party's never going to accept him, especially in California and Seattle. But I found that fascinating. So maybe there's a split with a lot of Democrats because they're seeing that they're just gone way too far to the left. Now, another thing he said there, which might get him thrown out of both parties, is he talked about entitlements. Because really he was asked about the tax cuts. And that was his answer to the tax cuts. He says, the biggest problem I see right now is the debt. The debt is way too high. Interest rates are going to go up soon. That's what he said. And these entitlements are hanging over us, and it's going to be a real big problem. Almost sounds like a conservative there when he talks about that. And he says we have to do something about entitlements. So he talks about how the Democrat Party is way too obsessed with welfare programs and that we need to do something about entitlements. And yet he wants to run as a Democrat? I mean, come on. How is that even going to be possible? But he's right. I mean, he's not wrong. Everything he said there was right. And I wonder how many Democrats are out there, moderate Democrats, who are saying, he actually makes a lot of sense. I'm a Democrat. I don't believe in everything the Republicans do. But the Democrats gone way too far left. I think that's how Trump got some Democrats.
But a lot of those moderates are afraid to say that out loud.
Yeah, especially in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's very fascinating. There might be a split there in the Democrat Party. It's not talked about a lot. Now, another thing that I've noticed with the Democrats, and we've talked about it a lot on the show, is it seems like the Democrats are still obsessed with the idea that they're going to get elected and they're going to win the midterms and they're going to win other elections by attacking Trump. That has been their main campaign tactic this time, is to attack Trump. And there's another example of that, pretty extreme example. It's very interesting, where the whole ad is basically attacking Trump, saying, take that, Trump. Maryland Democrat Richard Madaleno. He is running for governor of Maryland. He put out a very interesting political ad. And instead of really talking about the state of Maryland, he slips it in there a little bit. It's basically all about, well, look how against Trump I am. Vote for me because I'm so against Trump. You have to hear this ad. It's pretty well beyond reason. Here it is.
I'm Rich Madaleno. I'm running for governor to deliver progressive results and to stand up to Donald Trump. Here are a few of the things I've done that already infuriate him. I protected Planned Parenthood from the Republicans in Congress.
Take that, Trump.
I helped ban assault weapons in Maryland.
Take that, NRA.
I believe in public schools, not vouchers.
Take that, Trump. And Betsy DeVos. Yeah!
And what's the number one way I piss off Donald Trump and the Republicans? Take that, Trump.
He kisses his husband.
Oh, boy. Oh.
He kisses his husband.
Really?
Now, here's the thing. Do you think Trump cares that he's gay? Trump doesn't care that he's gay.
No, but he wants the other gays to know he's gay.
Well, identity politics and all that stuff. But, I mean, Trump has been the most open with LGBT stuff. He doesn't care that he's gay. But this idea, that whole ad is literally having little kids yell, "Take that, Trump! I'm going against Trump." I wonder how much is this really effective? This just shows that the Democrats still believe that their biggest way to win elections is to be against Trump. Of course, now they're using little kids. Imagine if a Republican did this, used little kids in their ads as a tool. They would be so criticized by the left. How could you use little kids in that way? Those kids don't know any better. Well, they really don't. Those kids don't know what the heck they're talking. Take that, NRA. Sure. So, pretty beyond reason ad, but it just shows that there's still a lot in the Democrat Party who believe that being against Trump is going to win. We'll see. Maybe it will. Who knows? I mean, it did get him a lot of attention because I'm sure a lot of left believed it was hilarious, but we'll see if it actually works in winning elections. I don't know. Or we'll see if the Democrat Party finally listens to people like Howard Schultz and says, oh, maybe they've gone way too far left and completely unrealistic, and maybe we actually do need someone who, I don't know, will focus on the debt and entitlements and stop with just constant drumbeat of welfare. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. Have some more things to talk about, and I have a story that made Yaffee Laffee. We're bringing that back. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your voice of truth, Michael Yaffee. This is Orlando Smart Talk Radio here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA, part of the Beyond Reason Network. What you want to do is subscribe to the Beyond Reason Network podcast, and you can get this show. You can get the shows when I fill in for Good Morning Orlando. You can get the Florida Roundtable, and you can get other podcasts that I'm affiliated with as well. So subscribe to the Beyond Reason Network, and you'll find all of that stuff dealing with the world of Yaffee. I know everybody wants that. Stop laughing in there.
The world of Yaffee.
So before we get to my Laffee Yaffee, I have another thing I wanted to go over real quick. There's been a lot of talk in the past couple of days about the fact that McDonald's is adding these self-service kiosks. And for one, I have to say this hits home a little bit because my first job was in the fast food industry. I worked for Checkers, not McDonald's. I worked there for 2 years. I think everyone should have to work for food service at least once to find out how crazy people are, because people are nuts about their food. But I learned a lot about the real world in that job. I got paid, I started $5.75 an hour. That was my starting wage. I left, it was like $6.15 an hour.
All right.
Yeah, so it shows how inflation, they want $15. You realize, I just thought of this. They want $15 an hour minimum wage. That is almost triple what I was making starting out at 17.
And when was that? How old? How long ago was that? 15 years ago? 16?
About. It was 2004.
Oh, wow.
2003.
Yeah.
So
you've come a long way, baby.
But I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
In just the last 15 years, they want minimum wage to be $15 an hour, triple what I was making. No, you're going to legislate young people out of the workforce. That being said, they talk about how it's the minimum wage that is the reason why McDonald's is putting these kiosks in. I'm not sure I buy that. There's an interesting piece in Reason magazine that talks about don't blame the minimum wage for those self-service kiosks, because a lot of people are. I think it will speed up a lot of this for a lot of businesses, but I think the main reason why McDonald's is doing this and other businesses are doing this is because, frankly, it's more convenient. It just is. It's a better service for their customers. I mean, Wawa here locally, they have push-button screens.
Real simple.
It's a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot more options. You're able to see what you want. You can be able to get exactly what you want. It's a fewer chance of mistakes. And they still have a lot of employees at these Wawas because they need employees to make the food. They offer a lot more products now because it's a lot easier, so they need more employees to make those products. So it's not necessarily going to mean less workers at McDonald's, because they might need those McDonald's workers to do other things because the business picks up. But there's always a lot of fear of new technology, that it's going to replace jobs. It's been going on for 150 years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that's the case. I've talked about this before. But I really believe that the biggest reason why McDonald's is doing this is because, frankly, well, one, their business has been hurting lately. Their profits have been hurting lately because they have a lot more competition. They're trying to figure out a way to get more people into their shop. One way to do that is to make it a better experience. One way to have a better experience is to have these self-service kiosks because, frankly, I think they're better. It's a better experience. People say, well, why don't you just have more employees? I still think it's easier, even if you have more employees, to just go to the kiosk and put your button in. You can do it on the app. They have Uber Eats as well. So I think it was inevitable that these things were coming anyway, with minimum wage raising or not. That being said, you're going to take a lot of jobs away and legislate young people out of the workforce with hiring the minimum wage. All right. It is that time of the show once again. Things that made Yaffee Laffee. Yes, so this is the story out of Alabama. In fact, our friend in the newsroom handed this to me yesterday, and it's pretty interesting. Birmingham woman used promise of sexual favors in botched bank robbery.
Oh, jeez.
A Birmingham woman armed with a promise or a threat tried to rob a Forestdale bank Wednesday morning in Alabama. The holdup attempt happened just before 10 a.m. at a Regions Bank in Forestdale. The chief deputy, Randy Christian, said deputies responded to a report of a black female had entered the bank and handed the manager a note demanding money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Deputies arrived on scene quickly and found the suspect still inside the bank.
Mm-hmm.
She was taken into custody and is currently being questioned by detectives. Christian said information from the scene is that the would-be robber passed a note to the manager demanding $6,000 from the vault. The note read that if the manager complied, he would be rewarded with a sexual favor. If he refused, she would claim that he had sexually assaulted her.
Of course.
I don't know how she was going to get away with that, but okay. And this, this is what the deputy said in response. Said, I don't think I've ever heard of an attempt to rob a bank quite like this. Our deputies were on the scene very quickly and saved this employee from something. I'm not exactly sure what, but we saved him from something. I just love the last line there. Just saying, our deputies were on the scene very quickly and saved this employee from something. I'm not sure exactly what, but we saved him from something. The woman will be taken into the Jefferson County Jail to await formal charges. Here's the question I have. What do you charge her with?
Attempted bank robbery.
Is that just it? I mean, you can't say assault with a deadly weapon.
No.
It's kind of a bank robbery, but not, I mean, maybe you should pass a note to the cop that says, if you let me go.
Yeah, let me
So,
she probably is writing her note right now to her jailer.
Yeah. So that was one thing that made me laughy. Another thing that made me laughy, unfortunately, had to do with President Trump. Apparently, Trump said to the Canadian Prime Minister, talking about trade and all that stuff and national security, said, didn't you guys attack us in the War of 1812? No, Mr. President. That was Britain. And Britain controlled Canada at the time. And we actually tried to invade Canada in the War of 1812, and then it didn't work out. They actually beat us back then. So please learn your history, Mr. President, before you say certain things. All right, I appreciate you joining the show today. If you missed any of the show, check out the podcast on the Beyond Reason Network podcast stream. And, I'll catch you guys next time.